They laughed at my startup idea. 10 years later they begged me for a job. Revenge with Jan. My name is Louis Chen, and 10 years ago, 3 executives in a corporate boardroom laughed so hard at my startup pitch that one of them actually had tears running down his face. "This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard," the VP of product said, struggling to breathe through his laughter. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Last week, that same VP sent me his resume, along with a cover letter that started with, "I've always believed in your vision." This is the story of how I turned their mockery into a $100 million company. And how every single person who laughed at me eventually came crawling back, desperate for a piece of what they called impossible. Buckle up. This one's a long burn. But the payoff? Worth every second. June 15, 2016. I'll never forget that date. I was 26 years old, sitting in the glass-walled conference room of Tech Venture Capital in downtown San Francisco. I'd spent 18 months building a prototype for what I called FlowSync, an AI-powered workflow automation platform that could learn individual user behavior and optimize productivity without any manual input. Basically, it watched how you worked and made your job easier by predicting what you needed before you needed it. In 2016, that concept was radical. AI was still mostly science fiction to most people. Machine learning was a buzzword that tech bros threw around, but nobody really understood. I knew I was early, but I also knew I was right. The meeting was supposed to be with 3 partners at Tech Venture. I'd been introduced through a mutual connection, my former computer science professor who'd invested his own money to help me build the prototype. The partners were Richard Holbrook, VP of product at a major enterprise software company. Diana Westfield, head of a successful startup accelerator. And James Chin, no relation, a legendary angel investor who'd backed 3 unicorns. I walked in confident. Naive maybe, but confident. I gave my pitch. 20 minutes of carefully rehearsed explanation, demo videos, market analysis, competitive landscape. I'd practiced this pitch 200 times. I knew it was solid. When I finished, there was silence. Then Richard started laughing. Not a polite chuckle. A full, body-shaking laugh that made the other 2 exchange uncomfortable glances. "I'm sorry," Richard said, wiping his eyes. "I don't mean to be rude, but this is genuinely the most delusional pitch I've heard all year." My stomach dropped. Diana leaned forward. "Louis, let me be honest with you. What you're describing would require processing power that doesn't exist yet. The machine learning models you'd need haven't been developed. And even if they had been, no enterprise is going to trust an AI to run their workflows. There's no market for this." James nodded. "Kid, you seem smart. But you're wasting your time. This idea is 10 years too early. Maybe 20. My advice? Go get a real job at Google or Facebook. Learn how actual tech companies work. Then maybe in a decade revisit this." "But the prototype works," I said. "I can show you." "A prototype that works on your laptop with your own workflow isn't a product," Richard interrupted. "Do you have any idea how complex enterprise software is? How many regulatory hoops you'd have to jump through? How much capital you'd need to scale this? That's why I'm here. For funding." Richard laughed again. "We're not giving you money for this. Nobody will. This isn't a company. It's a hobby project." I felt my face burning. "With all due respect, I think you're wrong." "Of course you do," Diana said, her tone condescending. "Every founder thinks the VCs are wrong when they get rejected. But here's the reality, we see hundreds of pitches a year. We know what works. This doesn't." The meeting ended shortly after. I walked out of that building feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach. But as I rode the BART train back to my tiny studio apartment in Oakland, something shifted in me. They didn't just reject me. They mocked me, laughed at me, treated me like a naive kid playing make-believe. And that I couldn't let stand. I called my professor that night, told him what happened. "I'm sorry, Louis," he said. "I thought they'd at least give you a fair hearing." "They did worse than reject me," I said. "They humiliated me. So what are you going to do?" I thought about it for a long moment. "I'm going to build it anyway. And I'm going to make them eat every word." "Without funding?" "Without their funding," I corrected. I'll find another way. For the next 3 months, I worked my day job as a software engineer at a fintech startup, pulling down $70,000 a year. It was enough to live on and save a bit. Every night, I came home and worked on FlowSync until 2 or 3 in the morning. Weekends, I'd code for 12, 14, 16 hours straight. I lived on instant ramen and black coffee. I stopped going out. Stopped dating. Stopped doing anything that didn't directly contribute to building this company. My friends thought I was crazy. Dude, you got rejected by VCs. That means the idea doesn't work. Move on. But I couldn't. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew the technology was catching up to my vision. I knew Google had just released TensorFlow. I knew AWS was making cloud computing cheaper every month. I knew the infrastructure I needed was being built around me. I just had to be patient enough to catch the wave at the right moment. By September 2016, I had a working beta. Not just a prototype for me, but something other people could actually use. I recruited 20 beta testers. People I knew from online communities. Developers, project managers, small business owners. I gave them free access in exchange for feedback. The response was immediate. "This is magic," one beta tester wrote. "I don't understand how it works, but it's saving me 3 hours a day." I took that feedback and iterated. Fixed bugs. Improved the UX. Made the onboarding smoother. By December, I had 50 users. By March 2017, I had 200. None of them were paying yet. I was running this entirely on my own dime, covering server costs with my savings. But the growth was organic. People were referring their friends. Writing blog posts about it. Building their workflows around it. I quit my day job in April 2017. It was terrifying. I had maybe 8 months of runway in my savings. If I couldn't monetize FlowSync by the end of the year, I'd be broke. But I also knew I couldn't build this while splitting my time. I needed to go all in. So I did. The first year as a full-time founder was brutal in ways I couldn't have imagined. I moved out of my studio apartment and into a friend's garage. Literally. I slept on an air mattress surrounded by server equipment and whiteboards covered in architecture diagrams. I started charging for FlowSync in May 2017. $20 a month for individual users. $50 for small teams. $100 for businesses. The first month, I made $300. Enough to cover my ramen budget. Not much else. But every month, the number grew. $600 in June. $1,200 in July. By September, I was making $3,000 a month. Still not enough to live on, but enough to prove that people would pay. The problem was infrastructure costs were growing faster than revenue. Every new user required more processing power, more AI model training, more storage, more bandwidth. By November 2017, I was burning through my savings faster than I was making money back. I had 2 months of runway left. Maybe 3 if I ate nothing but rice and beans. I tried raising money again. Not from tech venture, I'd never go back there. But from other VCs, angel investors, accelerators. I got rejected 37 times. Too early stage. Not enough traction. The market isn't ready. Come back when you have 10,000 users. I remember one particularly brutal meeting with a VC who looked at my pitch deck and said, "I admire your persistence, but this is never going to work at scale. You should shut it down before you waste any more time." I walked out of that meeting, sat in my car, and screamed until my throat was raw. But I didn't quit. Instead, I did something desperate. I maxed out 3 credit cards. $20,000 each. 60 grand total at 19% interest. It was financially insane. If FlowSync failed, I'd be in debt for years. But if it worked, if I could just get to 10,000 users, then maybe someone would take me seriously. I used the money to buy better servers, to hire a freelance designer to improve the UI, to pay for Google Ads to drive user acquisition. And it worked. Slowly, painfully, but it worked. December 2017, 1,200 users. January 2018, 1,800 users. February 2018, 2,500 users. March 2018, 4,000 users. I was still losing money every month. But the trajectory was clear. People loved this product. They were telling their friends. Building workflows that depended on it. I just had to survive long enough to see it through. April 2018 changed everything. A tech journalist from TechCrunch was researching a story about AI automation tools. Someone in my user base recommended FlowSync to her. She signed up, tried it for a week, and fell in love with it. She reached out to me for an interview. I almost didn't respond. I was so buried in customer support tickets and bug fixes that I almost missed her email. But something made me reply. We had a 30-minute phone call where I explained the vision, the technology, the struggles of the past 2 years. "This is incredible," she said. "Why haven't I heard of you before?" "Because VCs wouldn't give me the time of day," I said. "I've been building this alone in a garage." That's the story right there. The article published on April 17, 2018. The one-man AI startup beating billion-dollar companies at their own game. Within 24 hours, I had 2,000 new signups. Within a week, 10,000. My servers crashed 3 times. I had to emergency upgrade my infrastructure. Spent another $5,000 I didn't have. But the attention was real. Suddenly VCs who'd rejected me were emailing. "We'd love to revisit our conversation." I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on something else. I'd noticed a pattern in my user data. 40% of my users worked at Fortune 500 companies. They were using personal accounts to run FlowSync because their companies didn't offer anything comparable. That was my opening. Enterprise sales. I cold emailed the CTO of a mid-sized tech company. 500 employees. Offered him a custom demo. He took the meeting. I showed him how FlowSync could save his team 30 hours a week. How it could integrate with their existing tools. How it learned individual working styles and optimized accordingly. He bought a company-wide license for $50,000 a year. My first major client. I used that money to hire my first employee. A brilliant engineer named Priya who'd been following FlowSync since the beta days. She took a pay cut to join me. Believed in the vision. Together, we started closing enterprise deals. One company at a time. 50,000 here. 100,000 there. By December 2018, FlowSync was doing 700,000 in annual recurring revenue. Still small. Still scrappy. But profitable. Actually, genuinely profitable. I paid off my credit cards. Moved out of the garage and into a real apartment. Hired 2 more engineers. And I started keeping a list. Every person who'd rejected me. Every VC who'd laughed. Every expert who'd told me this would never work. I didn't plan revenge. Not exactly. But I wanted to remember. So when the moment came, I'd recognize it. 2019 was the year everything accelerated. By March, we had 35 enterprise clients. 2.5 million in AR. A team of 8 people working out of a co-working space in Soma. I finally raised my first round of funding. Not from any of the VCs who'd rejected me. From a new fund run by founders who'd built companies themselves. People who understood the grind. $2 million at a $12 million valuation. I kept 70% equity. The funding let me hire faster. Build faster. Market faster. We closed the year at 8 million in AR, 50 employees. Offices in San Francisco and Austin. And we were just getting started. 2020 hit. COVID-19 changed everything. Suddenly, remote work wasn't optional. It was mandatory. And companies that had resisted workflow automation tools were desperate for anything that could help distributed teams stay productive. FlowSync was perfectly positioned. We'd spent 3 years building tools for exactly this scenario. Our growth exploded. January 2020, 8 million AR. June 2020, 22 million AR. December 2020, 45 million AR. We raised a Series B, 30 million at a $200 million valuation. I was a 30-year-old CEO of a company worth 9 figures. A company I'd started in a garage after being laughed out of a VC meeting. But I wasn't satisfied yet. Because the real competitors weren't other startups. They were the enterprise software giants. Companies like the one Richard Holbrooke worked for. I wanted to beat them. Not just compete. Beat them. 2021 through 2024 were a blur of growth, competition, and strategic execution. We kept our heads down while competitors tried to copy us. But they were always 6 months behind. Because they didn't understand the core technology like we did. They were building AI automation as a feature. We'd built it as the foundation. By 2022, we'd surpassed 100 million in AR. 1,500 employees. Offices in 6 countries. The enterprise software company Richard worked for tried to acquire us. Offered $400 million. I declined. We were worth more. And I wasn't selling. Not to them. By 2023, we were at 300 million in AR. Raised a Series C at a $1.5 billion valuation. We'd become a unicorn. The startup those VCs had called impossible was now worth more than most companies in the industry. And then came 2024. The market shift I'd been waiting for. The economy tightened. Tech companies started cutting costs. Layoffs were everywhere. Companies that had ignored automation were suddenly desperate for it. We were the market leader. The proven solution. The company everyone wanted to work with. Our competitors struggled. The enterprise giants who dominated for decades were losing market share to us. Because their products were built on 20-year-old architecture. They couldn't adapt fast enough. Richard's company announced layoffs. 15% of their workforce. Their stock dropped 30% in a week. Meanwhile, FlowSync kept growing. We crossed 500 million in ARR in October 2024. And then, in November, Richard's company announced a major restructuring. They were shutting down their workflow automation division entirely. Couldn't compete with us. 300 people lost their jobs. Including Richard Holbrooke. December 3, 2024. I was in our San Francisco headquarters, reviewing Q4 numbers with my executive team. My executive assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Louis, you have a message flagged as high priority." "From who?" "Richard Holbrooke." The room went silent. Everyone on my team knew the story. I told it at our company all hands. The pitch that ended in laughter. The mockery that fueled 10 years of building. What does he want? He's asking for a meeting. Says he has something important to discuss. I looked at my CEO. "What do you think?" She grinned. "I think you should absolutely take that meeting." I scheduled it for the following week. December 10th. In the same conference room where I'd pitched FlowSync to our first enterprise client. Richard showed up on time. He'd aged badly. Hair graying, face lined with stress. He wore a suit that looked expensive but didn't fit quite right anymore. Like he'd lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. I kept him waiting 10 minutes. Not to be petty. Just because I had other things to do. When I finally walked in, he stood immediately. Extended his hand. "Louis. Thank you for seeing me." I shook his hand. Sat down. Waited. "I'm sure you heard about the layoffs," he started. I did. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" He smiled weakly. "I wouldn't be. I was brutal to you. I've thought about that pitch meeting more times than I can count over the past few years." "Have you?" "Louis, I want to apologize. I was wrong. About everything. Your vision, your technology, your ability to build a company. I was arrogant and short-sighted, and I dismissed you because you didn't fit the pattern of what I thought a successful founder looked like." I said nothing. Just watched him squirm. "I'm here because I want to work for you," he finally said. "FlowSync is the future. I can see that now. And I think I could add real value to your team. I have 20 years of enterprise software experience. Relationships with CTOs at Fortune 500 companies. Strategic insights into. Why would I hire you?" I interrupted. He blinked. "Because I'm good at what I do. Because I can help you scale even faster. You told me my idea was the dumbest thing you'd ever heard. You laughed. You literally had tears running down your face. You were laughing so hard." "I know. And I was wrong. You told me to get a real job at Google. To learn how actual tech companies work. You treated me like a naive kid who didn't understand how the world worked. I did. And I'm sorry. I leaned back in my chair. Richard, do you remember what you said when I told you I thought you were wrong? He shook his head. You said, of course you do. Every founder thinks the VCs are wrong when they get rejected. But we see hundreds of pitches a year. We know what works. I remember. Here's what I learned over the past 10 years. The people who claim to know what works are usually the ones most blinded by past success. They can't see the future because they're too invested in the present. I stood up. I appreciate you coming here. I really do. And I accept your apology. But I'm not going to hire you. Why not? Because every time I look at you, I'll remember that boardroom. And I'll remember the feeling of being dismissed by someone who was supposed to know better. I don't want that energy in my company. Richard's face fell. Louis, please. I need this. My career is over if I can't. Your career is your responsibility, I said. Mine was mine. I didn't have anyone to catch me when VCs laughed at me. I figured it out. You will too. I walked to the door. Opened it. Best of luck, Richard. He left without another word. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just emptiness. This was supposed to be the moment. The revenge I'd fantasized about for years. And it felt hollow. But Richard was just the first. Over the next 3 months, I received resumes from 17 people who'd rejected me at various points over the years. Diana Westfield, the accelerator head who'd told me there was no market for AI workflow automation. She'd shut down her accelerator after her portfolio companies failed to compete with modern AI startups. Now she wanted to join FlowSync's investment team. I declined. James Chin, the angel investor who'd said my idea was 20 years too early. His last 3 investments had failed. He wanted to advise us on fundraising strategy. I declined. Louis Wellington, a VC who'd told me in 2017 that I'd never hit 10,000 users. He wanted to lead our Series D. I declined. We didn't need his money. Every rejection felt the same. Hollow. Empty. Like winning a game I'd stopped caring about. My therapist, yes, I'd started seeing one in 2022, asked me about it in a session. You built this company partly to prove them wrong, she said. And now that they're acknowledging you were right, why doesn't it feel good? Because I stopped building for them years ago, I realized. I started building for users. For my team. For the problem I was solving. They became irrelevant. So what do you want now? I thought about that for a long time. I want to build something they can't live without. Something so fundamental to how work gets done that they have no choice but to use it. Sounds like you're already doing that. Then I want to do it bigger. In February 2025, we made an announcement that shocked the industry. FlowSync was acquiring 3 smaller AI automation companies. Not to eliminate competition, but to integrate their technology and create something new. We called it FlowSync Enterprise. An end-to-end AI operating system for businesses. Not just workflow automation, but intelligent resource allocation, predictive analytics, automated decision-making. It was everything I'd envisioned in that first pitch in 2016. But 10 times bigger. The market reacted immediately. Our valuation jumped to $3 billion overnight. And here's the beautiful irony. To build FlowSync Enterprise, we needed to hire people with deep enterprise software experience. People who understood the old systems well enough to replace them. People like Richard Holbrook. My head of HR came to me in March. We're having trouble finding qualified candidates for the enterprise integration team. There just aren't that many people who have the experience we need. What about people from the companies we're replacing? I suggested. You mean your old competitors? Exactly. They built the systems. They know where all the bodies are buried. They'd be perfect for helping us build the replacement. Over the next 2 months, we hired 47 engineers and product managers from legacy enterprise software companies, including 6 people who'd worked under Richard at his old company. But not Richard himself. Not because I was being petty, but because we genuinely didn't have a role that fit his skill set. The industry had moved past what he knew. And that, I realized, was the actual revenge. Not denying him a job out of spite, but building something so advanced that his expertise became obsolete. The world had changed, and he hadn't changed with it. Today, FlowSync is valued at $8 billion. We have 4,000 employees. We process workflows for 60,000 companies worldwide. And I still keep that list. The people who rejected me, who laughed at me, who told me I was wasting my time. Not because I'm angry, but because I want to remember. I want to remember that the experts are often wrong. That the people who claim to know the future are usually the ones most trapped in the past. I want to remember that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's making them irrelevant. Richard did eventually find another job. At a much smaller company, in a much smaller role. I heard through mutual connections that he tells people he almost invested in FlowSync. That he saw the potential but the timing wasn't right. I don't correct him. Let him have that story. It doesn't change what actually happened. Diana pivoted to consulting. Helps startups with go-to-market strategy. She does well enough. James retired. Lives in Napa, invests in wineries now instead of tech companies. They're fine. They'll be fine. The world doesn't end when you're wrong. But here's what I learned that I want you to know. When someone laughs at your idea, when they dismiss you, when they tell you that you don't understand how the world works, you have two choices. You can believe them. Internalize their doubt. Give up because the experts said it won't work. Or you can use it. Let their mockery become fuel. Let their rejection become proof that you're seeing something they can't. Most people choose the first option. They hear no from people they respect and they fold. The second option is harder. It requires years of work with no guarantee of success. It requires believing in yourself when literally no one else does. It requires the discipline to build in obscurity while others get attention. But if you choose that path, if you stick with it long enough, something magical happens. You don't just prove them wrong. You make them realize they were playing the wrong game entirely. And that's worth more than any quick win. Any moment of satisfaction. Any petty revenge. I built FlowSync to solve a problem I knew existed. The fact that it also proved wrong everyone who doubted me? That's just a bonus. So if you're watching this and you've been rejected, mocked, or dismissed, here's my advice. Remember their names. Remember what they said. Write it down if you have to. Then get back to work. Build what you believe in. Not to prove them wrong, but because you know it needs to exist. And 10 years from now, when they send you their resume, you'll have a choice. You can hire them if they genuinely add value. Or you can politely decline and keep building. Either way, you'll have one. Because they'll be asking you for permission to be part of something you created. And there's no revenge more complete than that. Thanks for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to Revenge with Jan for more slow burn stories where patience always pays off. Remember, the best revenge isn't quick. It's inevitable. I'll see you in the next one.